In the concluding lecture of this course, I want to consolidate all the ideas that we have explored throughout this series of lectures and try to bring out this fact as to why studying and examining the issues related to ethics is important even in today's times. The interrelationship between technology, law, and ethics is quite complex one. Usually the narrative goes something like this. Technology moves fast and law always does the catching up game. Law cannot predict what will be the technology of the future, nor it can have a say on how, supposedly, if the technology falls into the hand of the bad elements, can be tackled. All the laws that we see today, which regulate the use of technology, have followed the technology. For example, first came the printing press. Copyright law followed the printing press. Before printing press, there was no copyright law. Before industrial revolution, there were no patents. Technology brings out new possibilities. And then when the society feels that the entire situation should be regulated, after a social consensus emerges, there will be some law to regulate that. It was working fine for a long time. But with the introduction of computers and internet, and now the merging of internet and computing devices, we are in such a situation where the technology is moving so fast, and it's not only moving fast, but it is reaching our lives so rapidly that the changes which required decades to reach the common man is today reaching us in a matter of, if not months, at least in a year. And some developments reach us within a matter of hours. For example, if Facebook decides to add a new feature, it will immediately impact everyone using Facebook instantly. It was not so earlier. If there was an invention in some other country, for it to reach India and to reach the remotest part of India, it would take a long time. It is not so today. Some policy change in Facebook will impact somebody in California and somebody in the remotest part of India who is using Facebook using his smartphone. This is what we need to study. We need to understand. We need to understand how to tackle this situation wherein the change is happening so rapidly that the law cannot respond to it. For example, before a few years, there was this huge cry on this fact that media companies are losing the revenues because people are sharing music and video and movies. And media companies are losing the major chunk of their revenues. Now, law responded by shutting down many file sharing devices, many file sharing websites, Napster and others. What happened? What happened? Did the entire phenomena die down? No. It has re-emerged in new ways. Today we have torrents. Now, even if torrents are bad, by the time the ban is enforced, we will have some other technology, some other tool. By the time law responds to a technology, the technology would already become old and a new version of that technology would be in place. So how long can we depend on law to answer some of the questions raised by technology? We cannot depend on law. Yes, law is important, and as Mahatma Gandhi said, a good and just law is nothing but embodiment of ethics. A good and just law is something which all of us will accept. But the problem here is the law cannot answer all the questions coming out of technology. Therefore, we need to look at alternatives. That is why we are interested in studying ethics here. Why are we studying ethical philosophy, moral guidelines? Is because to understand the impact of technology, we cannot answer the question of whether this technology is quote unquote good or bad through law. We need some other framework, and that framework we believe will be available in ethical philosophies and moral guidelines. For every problem caused by computers, if we make a law, then the question is settled. But what I am trying to say is this is not possible. We cannot regulate every action of technology through law. Therefore, we will take help of ethical philosophies and try to interpret technology through the existing philosophies in morality. For example, if you ask me whether self-decision making robots are good or bad, I keep saying that this formulation of question is wrong, but then we cannot make a law to regulate the working of robots. Then we should look at some of the ethical philosophies and try to answer this question. We should go back and see what does our age-old beliefs has to say something about it. May not be directly, but can we interpret those philosophies to current times? That is where we studied number of ethical philosophies in this course. All the ethical philosophies broadly fall into three categories: virtue ethics, consequentialism theories, and deontological theories. From the time humans understood themselves, they always wanted to lead good life. Who doesn't want to? But there should be some principles guiding their action. I should know whether whatever I am doing is right or wrong. So how will or who will guide humans? They took the help of ethical philosophies who fall into these three categories. Virtue ethics upholds the list of virtues or characteristics which, if embodied in a person, is considered to be good. This was followed by ancient philosophers both in the Eastern world and in the Western world. Virtue ethics. Make a list of characteristics which will make a person good and try to follow it. If a person is good, his actions ought to be good. That is the belief here in virtue ethics. In contrast, utilitarian theory or consequentialism theories talk about what will be the consequence of the action. If the consequence of the action performed is good, then the action is good. So the action is judged by the result it gives. Yes, the result of the action should be good, but good for whom? That's also a question. If I do something which will do good for me, then it becomes egoism. If I do something good which will be good for the nation, it becomes nationalism. If I do something good which will be good for everyone in this world, it will become universalism. If you add not only humans but all living creatures into this, it becomes speciesism. If it becomes good for majority of the people most of the times, it becomes utilitarian. If it becomes good for most of the people except me, it becomes altruism. So, consequentialism as a theory has different forms. But the main thing here is you are focusing on what is the result of my action. If the result of my action is good, the action is labeled as good. Can we accept it? Just because maximum people are benefited from some action and it causes irritation to a small minority of the people, can we accept it? Is good and bad at the end of the day all about arithmetic? 300 people benefited, 3 people suffering. Does this make the whole situation better, good? These are the things which we have debated, and this will be continued to be debated in the context of technology also. For example, take the case of surveillance tools. The governments will be interested in having a surveillance tool upon its citizens. Now, who will be benefited? The entire citizenry will be benefited. Who will feel bad? Small set of people who value their privacy, they may feel bad. So should we go ahead? With utilitarian theory, you can say yes. But does it settle the issue? Or for example, take the case of building large-scale dams. Building a large-scale dam may displace significant number of people, but their number will be much lesser than the number of people who will be benefited from that dam. So should we go ahead? This kind of questions will be asked, and we should know how to tackle it. That is where the third class of ethical philosophy will help us, the deontological theory. Deontological theory emphasizes on what we call as duty ethics. Here, it is not the consequence which is important. Here, how you treat a human is more important. As Immanuel Kant put it in a very beautiful manner in his categorical imperative theory, if you are using humans as a means to reach your end, then it is wrong. If you are using people as a tool for gaining happiness, even if it gets happiness for maximum people, it is wrong. You should value each individual. This is deontology. So where do we place ourselves will depend on the situation in hand. It is not that we have to apply all ethical theories for our case. It's not that. You see which one fits to the situation. Can we do this? Can we use this ethical philosophies? Or do we rely again on religion? Because as I keep saying, most of our moral principles are guided by our religion. These ethical philosophies are common for everyone. Some of these concepts, it may be embedded in certain religion that we follow. But ultimately, it is religion which is a greater force of morality than this ethical philosophies. If my religion says this is good, there is more chance that I will do it. So, it is imperative for us to discuss religion here, and we have discussed religion. The question is, can we bring out some common principles from all this religion, moral philosophies? and try to have some kind of common moral principles that all of us can follow. General morality is on one hand and professional ethics is on the other hand. General moral principles apply even to professionals. But since professionals are special, because they have special knowledge, because they have special privileges, they have special responsibilities also. It is right that even a doctor should not lie, but there are special conditions in which he can lie. It is right that a lawyer has the right to defend his client even if he knows that the client has done the murder. That is his professional ethic. So, professional ethics is different and special from general morality. Therefore, we have discussed professional ethics also. So, when I am working as a software engineer, if I have to decide whether whatever I am doing is right or wrong, first I will take the help from moral philosophy. If it can help me, yes. If not, I will consult my religion. If I get answer there, fine. If not, I have to turn back to my professional code of ethics. And thankfully for us, we have IEEE ACM code of ethics, which tells me what is wrong, what is right. In time of conflict, when there are two things which are equally right, which one should I do? That is more important. For example, if you are working as a software engineer in a company and you are developing an application and you find out that the application you are developing is for a country which is known for violating human rights, and you know that the software that you are writing will be used by the dictator in that country to further impart suffering to its citizens, will you be part of it or not? Here, on the one hand, you have obligation to your organization. On the one hand, you have obligation towards humanity. Which one will you choose? These kind of questions can be settled by consulting the professional code of ethics, which tells us very clearly that as software engineers, our primary priority is towards public. Next comes employee. So, following my code of ethics, I will say my obligation towards general public and humanity is over and above my obligation towards my employer. So like this, we have developed a framework to decide what to do in case of ethical dilemma. The framework is very clear. First, I will see whether there is any law and whether law says something about it. If the law says something about it, the issue is settled. If the law does not have something to say about it, then I will consult these things. My moral theories, ethical philosophies, religion, code of ethics. And finally, I will consult social norms and societal etiquette. So we have developed this very neat framework which we then use to discuss some of the contemporary issues in computer science. Issues like privacy, intellectual property rights, accountability, all these issues were discussed. Then we moved on to debate some of the issues which are emerging. As I keep saying, technology is emerging at a very fast rate, and as we practice the profession, as all of you will continue practicing your profession for 10, 20, 30 years from now, you will encounter newer situations. Maybe in artificial intelligence, many of the questions are still unsettled. For example, auto-driving vehicles, vehicles which are driving on their own. If such vehicles come, and God forbid some accident happens and somebody loses their life, who should be responsible? We are now talking about drones which will deliver articles to your doorstep. What if something goes wrong then? Who should be held responsible? We are now talking about sequencing the entire human genome. When it first came in 2002 or somewhere there, it would cost big. It would cost too much. I think around $100 million. The first genome sequencing cost. Now it has come down to around $1,000, and people are saying in coming days the entire human genome sequencing will cost less than a cup of coffee. When that happens, and which is happening, there will be various questions asked about who will own that data, and can companies trade that data? Does my DNA belong to me or to someone? Can I sell it to someone? These kind of questions will be asked. What questions are being asked today regarding our social networking data? The same questions will be asked for genome data. And for social network itself, the questions are not settled. For example, do you own the posts that you put in Facebook? Do you own the tweets that you put out in Twitter? Are the photos you share in Instagram yours? Or does it belong to the company? There is a big fight which is going on. According to the policies of these websites, you have to surrender the copyright and other right to the company. So they own it. What will they do once they own it? They can sell it to third party. That is why most of the applications today ask you to log in using your Gmail or Facebook ID. I hope all of you have seen that trend. A third party application will ask you to log in using your Gmail or Facebook ID, because once you do that, whatever data you generate in that application is also shared with Facebook, which they can sell to third parties. That is what is happening. It is here some of the things are very unclear. And the problem is, these social networking sites are coming more mainstream. If you and I share some data, it's okay. But what if governments share data through these sites? Is it legitimate for government to use this third-party social networking platform? This is today contested in India. Govind Acharya, who was a BJP ideologue earlier, has filed a PIL saying that governments in general and government heads and ministers in particular should not be using social media, because there is a rule in this country that all the official records should stay within this country. And if this official data should move from this country to some other country, you require specific permissions. What happens when government announces its policy in Twitter or has a Facebook page is, the servers is located outside the country. And who will use them, how will they use them, nobody knows. There is a clear policy today in India that no government official should use private email providers like Gmail and Yahoo for doing official communication, because the servers are not in India. You cannot have a control over it. Such questions will emerge every now and then. Today the court is hearing this case. What the court will say, we should wait and see. But this problem will grow more acute in the coming days. Very recently, one of the major equipment manufacturers in networking said that yes, they are snooping on the internet data of our country also, and they are giving back the data to Pentagon. They have said it openly, and they are the one company whose product all of us use for the network purpose. What will be the implication of this? And can we have law to step in every time to answer such questions? And technology will continue to move forward. We will have robots to come in and help elderly people. Should we have law to control robots? Can we do that? Or as engineers should we take more responsibility? We can't wait for law. You can't say that there is no law, so I am working like this. We have to take responsibility. The one message, the concluding message which I want to give in this course is that no amount of law, no amount of morality will help us until and unless we as engineers understand the impact of our work. All the issues that we have discussed should be embedded into our design. We should become more responsible and create such technologies which will create minimum trouble, if at all it should be created, minimum trouble to mankind. We should own the responsibility. All these issues should become the major issues for us whenever we are designing the software. Inclusive, sensitive software design should be our primary concern. That I think is the main message of this course. Thank you.